Good evening, everyone. Time is 6:31, and I'm calling to order the March 14th, 2023 Borough Council Work Session. That is item number 1, our call to order. I'm moving on to item number 2, which is our Pledge of Allegiance, which I would like to be led by Ms. Vaccaro. Thank you. Moving on to item number 3, which is comments, suggestions, petitions by residents in attendance regarding items that are not on the agenda. If anybody wishes to speak, please come to the podium, state your name and address for the record. Hi, Mr. Cook.
Darrell Cook, South Walnut Street. Does council have any plans to change the enforcement of the last ordinance passed for South Adams Street parking?
Yes, on top of my head, I can't tell you the exact date, but we did push it back until after the summer, I believe. Does anybody know that specific?
What we were supposed to do is start notifying people in April, having parking, putting little colorful tags on their windshields. So those people that are accustomed to parking there, because they'll leave in May, and that way they get an early warning. And from then on, when they come back in September, the no parking signs would be there.
Yeah, so it'll be a couple months of warnings and then reinforcement. Cool. Okay. Any other comments from the public or anybody? Okay, moving on. Under our ACT committee, we have item number 4, which is to amend the Borough of Westchester meeting room policy to allow meetings to end no later than 9:00 p.m. Monday through Thursday. This was recommended from the committee as 3-0. Any other info that we need to know about this?
I was moved from 7 to 9.
Okay, that's good to know. So it was extended. Yeah, it's good to know. I don't know. Do the doors lock to those main doors lock at a specific time? There you go. Okay. Any comments on this from anybody? Any questions or from anybody out there on this? Okay, I think we can put that on our consent agenda for tomorrow night. Okay, we'll move on to item number 5. Under our Public Works Committee, we have approve awarding the bid for the roof repair replacement at the Borough Administration Building, 401 East Gay Street to ARC Roofing in the amount of $748,225. This was committee recommended 3-0. Any specifics about the roof replacement we need to know in terms of like the scope of it or the reasoning rationale?
Mr. Metric could probably speak better to this, but there are 2 parts to it. One's the base bid as well as a add alternate to replace some windows, glazing, and so forth. So, Sean, I don't know if you want to make a couple comments about this.
I think you have it summarized well, and the borough engineer is here tonight as well, who has helped us put together the bid, manage the specifications, and can address any specific questions you have about it. But generally, yeah, the base bid is the replacement of the roofing membrane and a replacement of about 1,000 square feet, more or less, of wet insulation that's over where our parking administration staff works. And it's also the add alternate is the replacement of the glazing and gasketing system in the skylight area in the lobby.
Just wait one other comment. Some initiatives that damage continue.
The one question I have about this is just in the fact that this whole building was renovated pretty recently. So was the roofing part of that renovation or not? And this is just old and that's why this needs to be.
No, the roof was not replaced in part of that 2016 project in borrowing where the staff moved over to the Spellman building and then came back.
Yep, understood. Okay. Comments? Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Stefano. To Mr. Klein from Pannoni, when they do the 1,000 square feet of remediation on the roof, it was pointed out to me today, to make sure that, because it's wet, that it may be an additional cost to us, which I don't know, because of mold or mildew growing in the space, which is not available to be seen right now. And it'd be pertinent to have one of our engineers there when they're opening the roof to
Okay.
make sure that there's no mold and mildew growth,
Yep.
because that would have to be remediated before,
Yeah, we did a laser scan of the roof, so we know the areas of concern.
Right.
So typically, yes, in those specific areas, we'll have somebody on site to observe at that time. So that's kind of standard procedure.
very good, thank you.
Any other comments from council or the mayor? No? Okay. Yeah, okay. Public, from the public? Mr. Lurgis, come on up.
Good evening. I'm Eric Lurgis, 117 East Middle Street. I was listening to the Public Works meeting when this was discussed, and what I heard was that the engineers estimated the bid to be 400, or the cost to be 400, is that correct? Of this project?
Yeah, the opinion of cost was for the base bid in the neighborhood of $425,000 and the alternate in the neighborhood of $70,000 plus or minus.
Okay.
I
And
could
then-
be off on that number a little bit either way.
No,
I'm trying to think
I'm
of
not,
the-
I'm not
Yeah,
trying to
I
hold
think
you
what
to
I-
it.
yeah.
But the point that was made at the Public Works meeting was that this is the first contract that has been bid under the new ordinance called the Responsible Contract Ordinance. And it was anticipated that costs would rise because it was going to narrow the field of contractors, potential bidders. But what I heard at the Public Works meeting is this is going up by 50%, roughly 400 going up to 600. So I'm asking you, council, whether you're prepared to spend an extra potentially $200,000 to do this under this new ordinance, and whether it might be time to revisit that ordinance and see if it was too restrictive in terms of limiting the number of qualified bidders. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I shared your concerns through Lucas when we were passing that. I don't know if we can definitively say, I don't know if we can have any kind of proof at this point saying, hey, if we didn't have that, we would have a much lower bid. I don't know. I don't know if there's a way to actually find that out.
He said it was estimated by the engineer to be 425.
I don't have a response for that exactly. I don't know how that works in terms of estimating large projects.
Yeah, if I can, I think Mr. McCoy said it best. I mean, there was an estimate we prepared back in, I think, October that we carried forward to this year, obviously, and to help Sean with some budgeting. Roofing especially, it's just hard to pin those numbers down. I certainly couldn't say X%. I mean, that's just not a number that exists in this world. Any borough project, we're doing prevailing wages. So we're paying prevailing wages set by L&I, which is a high wage for any municipal work. That's any municipality we deal with. I've had estimates that are off by 50%. I've had estimates that are within 1%. It's a little bit of a wild guess. And that's what it is, especially with, again, the circumstances, kind of construction materials, staffing, all that kind of stuff in the current world we're living in. If we didn't award this and we tried to bid it again in the future, probably see higher costs. It is what it is. We got 5 bidders who intended to bid, 4 that were competitive, all top 3 within, I think, less than 10%. So it's a very competitive bid with qualified contractors.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Mr. Spano.
Yeah, Mr. Floyd.
Mr. Klein, you want to hang out? What Mr. Lorgus is alluding to is that if we didn't use the RCO, the pricing should come in less expensive. But what Mr. Klein just mentioned was that we would have to pay prevailing rate. And no matter who did the job, the nice thing about the RCO is the fact that we're having trained apprentice workmanship done on the roof, that we don't expect any real issues at a later date because of the quality of the training of the employees. That's what the RCO actually does. It qualifies the people. The union rate and the prevailing rate are If they're not identical, they're very close to being identical. So no matter who bid the job, if we gave it to Bernie Flynn Roofing, I'd have to pay prevailing rate, the exact same rate that the union people would have to pay or the non-union people have to pay. That's the going rate at this particular time. And supply and demand is what it is right now for materials. So.
Yeah, understood. Okay. Any other comments? Okay, looks like we're on agreement on this, so this will go to our consent agenda for tomorrow night. Moving on under item 6 is approve awarding the bid for the 2023 landscaping contract to JHL Landscaping in the amount of $47,710. This was also committee recommended 3-0. I feel like they were our previous contractors too for this, for landscaping, if I'm not mistaken, but any comments on this? Mr. Allen?
Just a quick question. I ask this a lot. Have we looked at doing this in-house and compared that? I think I ask this every year, but
Sorry, I didn't understand I didn't.
sorry, have we looked at the cost differential of attempting to do this in-house through Public Works?
Not comprehensively, no. No, I think we do have an opportunity at the 2 wastewater treatment plants to have some cost savings, which is why we're going to be spending about $20,000. We're spending about $20,000 less on this bid award than we did last year. And we're trying to convert a pretty large area in both wastewater treatment plants to a meadow that we would mow once a year. So that would just cut down on the amount of time we spend mowing. But no, I don't have a number for what it would cost in time, materials, labor, and equipment to do it ourselves at all parks.
Cool, thank you.
It might be nice to know that. I know this was brought up, it's probably a couple years now, I feel like, when this was first brought up about bringing this back in-house. And I feel like it was pretty quickly decided that it would be a much higher cost, but I don't know if we have those numbers specifically. Wouldn't be a bad thing to just have that to know.
We can always maybe look at that in Finance Committee for the next budget season for
Yeah.
next year.
Absolutely. Any other comments on this? Comments from the public? Okay, this will go under our consent agenda as well for tomorrow night. Item 7 is approve awarding the bid for the 2023 wastewater soda ash contract to Univar Solutions in the amount of $104,396. This was committee recommended 3-0. I feel like we do this every year, and what's soda ash? Can you refresh my memory on what? I feel like I should know this by now after every year awarding this contract, but what exactly is this? I always forget. Anybody got the expertise to let me know? Everybody's looking around like I don't want to answer the question. Is it just a
I
waste?
haven't taken
Is it just
chemistry since sophomore year in high school, so I'm not too good on.
Mr. Edwards, I'm sure you could at least give it a crack.
Don Edwards, Public Works. I'm kind of sorry one of the wastewater guys isn't here today. So yeah, it's part of their wastewater treatment process, and I'm afraid I can't give you any more specifics than that.
Okay, it's just it's one of the processes, and we have to. Okay.
It is, yeah.
Okay. I just feel like every year we get it, and I just feel like it was a dumb question, but it wasn't apparently because nobody knows. So, okay. But it's something we need to do, so it's on there. Is any other comments on this? Okay, any comments from anybody out there? All right, we will put that on our consent. Thank you. All right, moving on to 8. Approve proposed park improvements at Hoops Park. This was a recommended 3-0. Any other comments about the specifics on this or anything you wanted to add about this?
Yeah, I'd like to have Mr. Kurowski tell us what park improvements he's planning for Hoops Park, because I think the general consensus, as we sit here today, is to wait till the master plan is done. If there's
Okay.
anything any larger than what's supposed to be.
Yeah, Mr. Krasik, could you give us a little rundown?
No, I'm not in disagreement with that at all. I think the update to the recreation plan is going to be significant, not only for this year, but moving forward to the years ahead to prioritize not only our maintenance issues, but our capital purchases as well. This is not a Parks and Rec delivered or proposed plan. This came from the Friends of Hoops Park. So we would say for all three, the bat box, the owl box, and the meadow, or just the meadow? Just so I know what I'm relaying back to them directly.
I think that we just need clarity that it's just the Friends of Hoops Parks recommendations and nothing beyond that in this particular line right here.
Correct. Yeah, this is not a borough funded project. Correct.
Thank you.
Okay.
So just to be clear, it's not including the disc golf?
No, not at all. No, this is strictly the bat box, the owl box, and the meadow. That's it. Nothing else.
Okay, that makes sense. Any other comments on this? Okay, we can move item 8 to our consent. Item 9 is approve the Friends of Marshall Square Park plan for tree planting for the spring of 2023. This was committee recommended 3-0. I don't know if we have to get into the specifics of the entire plan unless somebody has questions about it. Sure. Yeah, and I always I look forward to that because they, especially when the tree commission's involved, they're going to plant trees that are good trees to have. So, all right. Any other comments from anybody on this? Okay, we can put that on consent. Item 10 is approve the extension of Chestnut Street garage pollinator garden. This was also 3-0 from the committee. I don't know where exactly is this going to extend to? Just around the. Just keep going down there, yeah. I don't see a problem with that.
I do want to say one thing. The first weekend in April, the bid is going to be out there with the green team, and any volunteers who are available are welcome.
Great. Yeah, I know that the parts that already have the pollinator garden look great. So this would be a big improvement to have for not great looking buildings. So, yeah. Any other comments from anybody on this? Questions? Okay, cool. We'll put that on their consent. Moving on to item 11, which is approve the Goose Creek cleanup, which is March 25th, 2023. This is something that I've helped out for many years. Unfortunately, this year I have a prior engagement I can't help out, which I'm bummed about, but it's a really amazing event that you would be surprised if you've never seen it, the amount of trash that is pulled out of Goose Creek. So if anybody's available to help, I wish I was this year, but yeah, it's coming up in a couple weeks. Any comments on this? Okay. Okay. So this can go under consent as well. Item 12 is authorize the solicitor to amend Chapter 3-38 and 2A, advisory boards and commissions, tree commission, to increase the membership of the commission from 5 to 7 members and schedule a public hearing on May 17th, 2023. This was committee recommended 3-0. Just had more people to get around the borough. Understood. Yeah. Okay. We good with that date, May 17th? Okay. Any other comments? That will go under consent. Moving on to under our Smart Growth Committee. We have consider solicitor attendance for zoning appeal number 1000 of 734 South Franklin Street. Applicant seeks relief from section 112-307B to reduce the required side yard setback. This was recommended 3-0 to not send a solicitor. Mr. Gore, can you explain this a little bit? I read this, but I didn't get a chance to look at the plans. I'm not quite sure what it's asking.
Sure. So this is currently a vacant lot. The applicant would like to construct a single-family dwelling there. Currently, the zoning ordinance would require a minimum of 10-foot side yard there on the left-hand side as we're oriented toward this plan. They would like to reduce that from 10 feet to, I think, 3.5 feet. If I can read that correctly. Bill, if you can zoom in a little bit, that'd be great. Yes, 3.5 feet is the variance that they're asking for.
Now, how does this affect parking at all? I'm looking at the.
They will be required to provide 2 off-street parking spaces for the new home.
Okay. Makes sense. All right. Does anybody feel strongly to need to send a solicitor to this meeting? Okay, I agree. So essentially, we will discard this item. We will not go under consent tomorrow because none of us feel the need to send a solicitor. Okay, so item 12 is gone. Oh, 13, sorry, my bad. 13, thank you. Okay, moving on to item 14, approve 535 North Church Street, preliminary final land development.
Bill, can you actually pull up the plan? Should be labeled sealed plan set. Sealed set, the second one from the bottom. So this is a preliminary final land development plan for the construction of 15 parking spaces on the southern side of the building, which is adjacent to the park. The Planning Commission did provide a favorable recommendation, including a waiver for a combined preliminary final land development submission, which is just a formality at this point, given the size of this project. It was reviewed by all of the consultants, the Tree Commission. The Tree Commission did provide some additional comments, which we have forwarded to the applicant, and they will ensure that those comments are incorporated into the final submission prior to recording. There were just some comments regarding protection of the existing trees on there's a really nice ginkgo tree there in adjacent to the parking lot there. They want to ensure the protection of those existing trees. No other real comments that were of any substance, but again, the committee recommendation was 3-0 for the approval of this land development. The applicant and their legal counsel and engineer are here to answer any technical questions regarding the submittal, if you have any.
I had a question. When you proposed it, did you, correct me if I'm wrong, I thought I heard at some point that the original agreement said that they could have 10 parking spaces.
No, so there was no agreement. The original land development approval for this site allowed them, they had the option, if they wanted to, they could expand the parking area for 10 spaces, which was in the northeast corner behind the existing maintenance building. But in order to install those 10 spaces, they're going to lose 6. So there's only a net gain of 4 parking spaces. But there's no agreement. They're not bound to that. If they wanted to stick with that existing land development, they could. But because they're going through a new land development process to provide for these 15 parking spaces, there's no agreement in place that they have to provide that parking area that was on the original plan. There's no, I've looked through the files. There's no restriction on this parcel that prevents them from doing this. So they are well within their rights to go through a revised land development process or additional land development process to construct the parking area.
Other comments or questions about this plan? Any comments from the public? Okay, well then I think we're in agreement, so we can move that onto our consent agenda. Moving on to item 15, which is approve 732/734 South Matlack Street preliminary land development. I think they're going to bring that plan up here now.
Wait, Bill, plan set, please. Go to the next page. So this, unlike the last submission that we just spoke about, this is only a preliminary land development approval. They will have to come back for final land development approval. This is 732 and 734 South Matlack. The applicant wishes to do a reverse subdivision of those 2 parcels to combine them into one. and construct 4 townhomes on that one parcel. The 4 townhomes will face Matlack Street, and there will be parking in the rear. The Planning Commission, again, has provided a favorable recommendation for the preliminary approval of this project. There are comments from myself and the consultants regarding the project, which the applicant will have to correct and address those comments prior to their submission for final land development. So this will undergo a second review. We will ensure that those comments are addressed prior to making any recommendation to Borough Council for a final land development approval. We do also have the applicant is here this evening, so he can certainly answer any questions from Borough Council. Bill, can you pull up the renderings of the facade? That was the second attachment. So here was the initial rendering from the applicant. There were some comments from the Planning Commission regarding the facade, essentially asking to make some improvements to that to make it look like they're really 4 separate units, and trying to change the center portion of the 2 buildings where they adjoin there. So the applicant has taken those comments into consideration. We'll go back to their architect, and I don't know if he has any update tonight regarding that, but certainly it's going to be reviewed at a second go around here for final land development submittal.
Yeah, it is confusing looking at that rendering. It does look like one big, I don't know, like a hospital or something. Yeah, it looks interesting. And the parking you said was in the rear from Mechanics Alley.
Mr. McGill is here. He can answer those, but there is a 2-car garage on each one of those units. And then there's additional parking you saw on the site plan, there was additional overflow parking. And they could also park outside of those garages according to the conversations that we had at the Planning Commission. So there is a significant amount of parking being provided for the 4 homes.
Yeah, I always have to ask that when everything's down in the 4th down there, because we need it. So, you guys have questions for the developers since they're here? Any questions, Mr. Allen?
I know these concerns were brought up last week as well, but I'm definitely very concerned with how out of context the structure is with the neighborhood. I'm not inclined to want to do a reverse subdivision if this is going to be the result. I'd like to see something fit a little bit better. And I know that's part of the comments you're talking about here, but I'm skeptical that one structure with a different facade can be made to look more like the neighborhood. I mean, maybe it can, but I'm concerned.
Yeah, I think I had similar comments last week. We seem to be losing our historic charm with some of these modern looking structures that we're putting up throughout the borough. And it, in my humble opinion, appears to be becoming more and more commonplace, where we're tearing down existing structures and putting up more contemporary looking units that just look out of place and don't fit in. We see that all over the East End. I see it down in this ward as well. I would just, as much for the planning committee as it is for this body, to just be more aware and conscious of how we are changing the aesthetics of the borough.
And I can certainly let Mr. McGill speak to that if he.
I would like that, because I agree with those comments. I live down there, so this is seeing all these houses. I'm used to seeing a townhome with a front porch, having something that kind of matches that. So this just looks out of place.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is our architect's first try at a rendering. And basically he based a lot of it off another home that was on Matlack, a block or 2 up, that was of newer construction. So he kind of took the smaller front porches with the metal, you know what I mean? Some of the box out windows and ideas that they had there. Obviously, brick is going to be a big part of this, and brick and siding. So it was an idea with base a lot of it, what we saw right up the street that was done as a first design.
We have no issues kind of reworking this because that is the idea to keep it with the look. I think the idea that originally he had where he had the center section was just a flat facade and we brought the front out. It was a good idea in his mind, but if we redo it, I think we can make it look like 4 different residences by getting rid of that center one and actually we're looking at a couple different ideas now with different types of dormer windows out on the roof on each, maybe something that breaks it up right through the center as well, and potentially putting a larger front porch that connects the 2 center units, which is something you see with a lot of the twins in the borough, is doing something along those lines. So we're, the best term, back to the drawing board for it. So really what we're going to try to do is probably bring a couple of different ideas to the planning commission and some ideas of what we think is going to work, but then be able to present it to them. But yeah, so facade wise, we're very willing to work with the borough on that.
I was just going to say thank you.
Can-
I
oh,
appreciate those efforts.
Can I just say one thing? So I've done quite a bit of work with new construction, and it's an effort, but it's a worthwhile effort. If you can make an effort to really look at the historical materials used and reference those as much as possible. I know you're referencing a new construction house that's right up the street. Stop doing that. Look at the old buildings.
Well, that's what we obviously tried to do, but then we wanted to see what has been built in the last couple of years that worked. So
I
yeah.
understand that.
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense. But I have done houses down in Chadds Ford and very different buildings. But I'm always trying to reference what existing and what historical buildings there are. So I have taken by the hand architects and designers and everybody and marched them through someplace historical and say, look at this, we can do this. And just do the same thing. Say, make this part of our community. And, by all means, make as much money as you can off of this, but please do it responsibly so that it looks like it belongs.
No, absolutely. And I think the biggest thing is you go through the borough, it's the use of the brick, you know what I mean? Where on this, we said we wanted to use a lot of brick and it's really, I don't think it's enough, you know what I mean? Right off the bat. And then with the changes in colors, the siding, you know what I mean? We're trying to do something that had some cedar shake look to it that might not be what was in some areas, but not quite in the borough. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Mayor, you want to? Yeah.
Yes, a couple of questions. One, are these units to be sold or
Yes.
rented?
Sold.
To be sold? And then I understand that there are 3 bedrooms, each of them?
The 3 with the potential for a 4th bedroom, depending on the design.
And so how much parking is being required all totaled?
Kev, it's a 2 per unit. The garage is pretty.
By ordinance, they're required to have 2 parking spaces per unit, so they need 8 there. And I think the plan provides for more than 8 parking spaces.
So each one has a 2-car garage, and each unit has a 2-car garage. Then there's going to be a deck out the back as an overhang. So you'll have 2 parking spaces outside. So really, you're going to have 4 spaces for each unit, and there's an additional 4 spaces in what we're calling basically the parking lot. So if guest things come over. So we really try to get as much parking in to take away any issues on the street, because obviously, street parking is always a big issue.
I think that seems like a lot, just considering most of the houses down there have 2 at the most.
Right.
Per unit.
Again, that's something on the sales end that we think is very important. You know what I mean? If people are going to, want to move into the borough, parking we know is an issue. So, and we have the room, especially coming off Mechanics Alley, to do it. So.
Well, I'll echo what Ms. Dorsey said about we appreciate you listening and being responsive to that and to looking at the design and getting it to match better. So.
And one of the things I was going to say, in keeping with what council has said, porches are very much a theme on South Matlack Street. And it seems to me that somewhere along the line, porches need to be incorporated in these townhomes, because almost every townhouse in that area has a porch.
Yeah. That was, in all honesty, I was a disagreement between myself and the architect where my original design I sketched had a big front porch on it. And we decided after looking at that one up the street that maybe this was something better. So we're going back to that look because as you look at more, there's so many twins in this area. So the twins with the shared porch. So the idea is, could we potentially make the center section that look like a twin by differentiating it, but connecting with the center porch like most of the other houses on that block?
How does this work in terms of, at this point, we're approving the land development preliminarily for a reverse subdivision.
It'll be a reverse subdivision and land development. It's preliminary. They have to come back for final. Under the NPC, the preliminary land development would allow them to, if they chose, to go in and start doing site work and things of that nature. But they're proceeding at their own risk because if there's any changes to the plan regarding the final, then they have to comply with that. I don't know what Mr. McGill's intentions are at this point, but this is the first administrative step in getting their final approval. Again, there's a lot yet to be cleaned up on the plan, and the Planning Commission will certainly make sure that those items are addressed before we make a recommendation.
Okay, so just so I'm clear on the process, if we have concerns that Mr. McGill, was it right? Okay, Mr. McGill heard. Just make sure he's addressing them. We approve this tonight, put this on consent for tomorrow night. He hears that, he's got the feedback, and he goes to Planning Commission next for a final development plan or whatever the next step is. He comes back to us and it looks just like that. We have another crack at saying no. Okay.
Correct.
All right.
And so can you separate the approval for the reverse subdivision from the land development? Because at this point, it sounds like we're in agreement with the reverse subdivision, but nothing else. Not want to see site plans done until we see a plan.
So at this point, they've submitted for reverse subdivision with the land development. Under the rules of the NPC, Borough Council has to take action within 90 days of that submittal. So we're here now. And you have to either approve or deny that submission. If that's going to be your decision to deny it, then they could come back and resubmit for just the reverse subdivision. And then they'll have to go through that whole process for the preliminary land development again and resubmit with all those comments.
What do we say, council? Is anybody inclined to deny this? Go ahead, Mr. Merkel.
And the parking is very much appreciated. So.
Absolutely. Mr. Allen.
I mean, I'm still preferring to see two twins personally. So if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind having it on discussion tomorrow.
That sounds good. So at that, unless we want to ask, I'll take some comment too from the public, but we will put that at the request of Mr. Allen on discussion. Mr. Cook, do you look like you want to speak to this?
Does anyone on council think that this property should be restricted from permit parking on the street?
On that block of Matlack Street? Probably not. I feel like that block is not like your block. 700 blocks, you can find spots.
And I'm a little confused on how many owners to this property will there be?
Four, I guess, right? Yeah.
Four unless
Somebody buys more than one.
So to answer Mr. Cook's first question, as part of any land development, Borough Council can they can provide for reasonable restrictions or make reasonable accommodations to the property. I don't know that you can restrict somebody from parking on a street legally on a property, especially when they've complied with the zoning code. And to answer the second question, if they're going to be required to set up an HOA for this. So as Mr. McGill said, I don't know, if somebody owned more than one property, we don't know how many owners there's going to be.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary down there, honestly, even if we could, Mr. Cook, especially with the fact that there's going to be upwards of 4 per unit almost, or at least 2, but more. I feel like I mean, for a 3-bedroom, I feel like that's plenty. We're doing a lot, I think. But anyway, this is going to go on discussion for tomorrow night. So we'll talk about it again tomorrow night before we make our final decision. Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. McGill. Appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. So that'll go on discussion. That's item 15. We're going to move on to 16. Approve February 2023 HARB certificates of appropriateness. I looked at both of these. Looks like they were both approved with some recommendations from the HARB. If there's anything, anybody has issues with in those recommendations, we could, but they look pretty routine regardless of, or, besides that. So. Okay, so we're good with that. So we'll put items 16A and B under our consent for tomorrow night. Under our finance and revenue, we have item 17, which is approve a write-off of the general fund internal due to fund balances. Ms. Leonti.
Good evening. Bill, if you could just go to page, I believe it's page 3. Yes. I'm sorry, the next page, please. So one of our main goals for 2022 was to ensure that our interfund activity was reconciled and maintained so that we would not end 22 greater than what we started the year with. So looking at this reconciliation here, you will see that we started the beginning of 22 with about $6.8 million in interfund, general fund liability balances. And we ended the year with about $6.4 million in interfund liability balances. That's about a $448,000 decrease over the year. Our ask tonight is that we are asking council to write off $6,586,680 in interfund general fund liabilities, which exist between the sewer, parking, shade tree, debt service, and highway aid. Just a little bit of a background. One of the main reasons a liability can be satisfied is either to move money or to write it off. In this case, we think that the general fund would benefit from this write-off. Currently, we ended last year, 2021, with a negative $6.5 million fund balance. If this write-off were to be approved tonight, that would significantly increase that fund balance and put us back into a positive position. Going back in time to kind of, explain how we got here, interfund liabilities have always existed on our books. They just have not been to this extent. And they got to this extent from the years 2016 through 2018. And one of the reasons that those balances increased between that time frame is because of the way that we accounted for transfers. Typically, when we transfer money, we are either satisfying a liability or meeting our budgeted transfers. When we did those transfers of monies back in that time frame, all of those transfers were being recorded to the liability account instead of allocating between the payoff of liability and meeting the general line item for fund revenue. Had this been done, the proper way, the general fund would be in a much more positive position than it is today. But the problem with liabilities is that they exist. They don't go away. They don't roll forward into fund balance like a revenue or an expense does. So that's a summary of what we're asking for tonight. Are there any questions?
I think I understood 60% of that, but
I tried to do that as simple
no, I
as I
appreciate
could.
it. But I do see it's committee recommended 3-0. Is there anything anybody wants to comment? Mr. Allen, you want to?
Yeah, I have had several meetings about this topic here. really for the past year. So this has been a long project of the Finance Committee, and we've been keeping track of this in our committee meetings pretty much every month. The way that I thought to describe it, that I think kind of simplifies it the best, is like if I owe you $100, I pay you $100, and then I don't erase the debt on my book, it looks like I'm $100 in debt when I'm not, because I satisfied that. I don't need to transfer that $100 to you again, but it's still like my credit's getting whacked because it looks like I'm in debt when I'm not. So it's just that kind of like interfund play that we're looking at. And between all of our funds, which, how many are there? Is it?
There's 7, I believe. There
So
could
it'd be
more than that.
49 different fund relationships, right? So we took, like, by we, I mean the finance department here, took the year just to really make sure that these practices were taken care of and that everything was properly accounted for, so we wouldn't have to do this again next year. And everything looks good.
Okay, I think I'm up to 75%, so thank you. Nick, I think that makes a lot more sense now.
Mr. Spano.
Yeah, Mr. Flynn.
All right, I'll help you get all the way there now, so you can understand really what a write-off is, okay? A write-off is a reduction in recorded amount of an asset, or assets or our money, right? A write-off occurs upon the realization that an asset no longer can be converted into cash, can provide no further use to the business, or has no market value. This for the write-off is mandated when the account is there. So all this other miscalculations or categorizing them was all done 2 previous administrations ago. And we've been asking, the Finance Committee has been asking to write it off for quite a while. And finally, Dale from Mealy says, clean up your books. That way there you look good. So a write-off is just getting rid of something that you can never cash in on again,
Okay.
as Mr. Allen said.
I think I'm pretty close to getting it. Oh, yeah, yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, so just wanted to. Any other questions or comments on this then? Comments from the public? Okay, thank you. Oh, yeah, Mr. Lurgus, come on up.
Yes, Eric Lorgus again. I'm very familiar with this issue. I was aware of it before the Financial Advisory Board, whatever that thing was called, and we were going to look into it, and then the commission was disbanded. This, in fact, this goes back to when Sean just joined the borough, because I asked his predecessor about this, and he referred it to Sean, and the answer I got was it went back to 2016. And it was anyway, hold on. I just want to clarify something. I'm talking about the sewer fund right now. I'm not talking about all the other funds. Something happened to the sewer fund back in 2016 and 2017 that needs to be explained. It cannot simply be written off. And to further my concern, in your 2021 audit report, the auditors made a prior period adjustment of, I forget, it was pretty substantial, several $100,000. And again, they referred to this thing that's going on, the due to, due from, regarding the sewer fund. In fact, there were several funds that were involved in the 2021, it was a prior period adjustment. But I think that you need to get to the bottom of why these things happened. One of the things I would look for is a budget variance. So each year when the auditors do their report, they look at variances between the budget and actual. But when they did the prior period adjustment, they didn't go back and adjust that report. So basically they skipped a step, right? So when they did the 2020 budget to actual, they said, that's fine. But in 2021, they discovered something that they didn't see back in 2020. So they made that prior period adjustment. If I were you, I would want to know more about how these big numbers, and I'm not talking about the parking fund, because the borough is allowed to take any money at once from the parking fund, but not for the sewer fund. The sewer fund is basically money that's been collected from ratepayers to pay for the sewer business. And if the borough borrowed from the sewer fund, it must repay the sewer fund. It cannot simply say, well, we can't figure out how it got there, so we're going to write it off. I mean, technically, I suppose you can do this, but I'm hoping that you would be more curious and want to know how these 2 entries, the one that happened in 2016 and the one that happened in the prior period adjustment, how they came to be. Thank you.
All right, I can, my hair was brown when we first started in 2016 or 17 or whatever it was. Now I look like a Q-tip. But the fact of the matter is, and Barbara attests to this, two administrations ago, the borough manager at that particular time went to the wastewater sewer treatment fund and basically took out more money than was actually needed or correctly needed. And what they did was, during that time, they used that money, which they were allowed to remove, but they took too much money out, and they used it actually, if I'm correct, Barb, to pay off a lot of other little debts that we had and to balance the budget at that given time. And it was never reconciled correctly to the right line item. Am I on mark, Barb?
Yes.
Or did I miss anything?
No, you're
So
correct.
that's the true reason of why it was happening. There's rumors of why the previous borough manager, two borough managers ago, removed the money. The rumor was that he wanted to bankrupt the sewer treatment plant, so council would think it was a liability instead of an asset, and to move forward with it. But all the money that he did remove from the sewer fund went into the general fund, and it was used to balance the budget that given years. Am I correct?
Yes.
There you go. So that's the answer. Was it right? Only that person can tell. But we were stuck with the journal entry now that needs to be written off.
If I may, I'd like to make one comment to what Mr. Lorgus pointed out. He is correct. There was a prior period adjustment done. It was not done for the sewer fund. It was to write off the equipment technology fund, which is a fund that's no longer in use. And that's why that prior period adjustment was made.
Barb, is there anything that I missed that you can opine on that we could finally put this whole thing to rest with the back history that I just covered?
No, I mean, again, had those monies been recorded in the line item that they should have been, yes, there would have, in those years, you would have seen in the transfer from the sewer fund to the general fund, it would have been much greater than what the budget amount was for that year. So I think that answers everything that you just covered.
Okay.
Can I just, was it corrected at all, or this is what we can do?
This is what we can do to fix this at this point in time, because when you transfer money to meet the budget transfer when we prepare our budget documents, typically that's recorded as a debit to your cash and it's recorded as a revenue. But because we didn't put those in the right line items, we now have a liability that just moves on and on and on until you either move money to satisfy that or you write it off. And currently, the general fund does not have $2.2 million in it to satisfy that payable due to the sewer fund and the other funds that we are asking this write-off for. It's been continuing on. So if you were to look in our financial statements, I'm not certain of the page number, but there is a reconciliation that is done, and it'll show you every fund balance that either has a due to or a due from. And back from the 2016 to 2017 timeframe, those due to balances, that reconciliation was pretty large, and you can see all of that activity moving. And it has been, typically what we've been told is that most municipalities don't carry any sorts of balances like this. We have been, quote unquote, written up for that in the past when we've had, comments that were given to us. So it's sort of been something that we've known that we need to address. And that's why we're taking Mr. Umbenhauer's advice to try to correct that moving forward for the 2022 audit.
To your point, Ms. Vaccaro, Mr. McCoy, we can, as a council, decide that we want to pay back the $2.5 million out of the general fund instead of just writing it off, putting it back in the sewer fund. But unfortunately, as our finances are sitting right now, we don't have the cash to be able to do that, to satisfy. And it's been over 7 years, and we've carried it along. And also what has actually happened is because we've been not being diligent to address this thing, it's actually hurt our credit rating now. We've actually dropped down half of a level in the credit rating. And by cleaning up the stuff that we can clean up now, which is legal, we all now know why it happened. And it makes sense now to start with a clean slate in 2024. And we can, at that particular time, have a positive cash flow into the general fund.
I think the logical next step of that conversation is something that we talked about in my meeting, I guess, a couple weeks ago. The sewer fund is going to be okay. We were reasonably optimistic, right, about what we saw. So looking at that, I was pretty encouraged by, the future of what we're going to be able to do with the wastewater plant.
Thank you, because that's my overall concern is this really going to clean it up? And then what's happened to the sewer fund? So all of that, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Okay, I think I'm there. Yeah, Mr. Luger, is that you again? Yeah, sure.
Follow up here. So up here so the Facebook people can hear. So Bernie, what you said, I imagine is what happened is there was more money transferred from the sewer fund to the general fund to accomplish some purpose. But at the end of 2016, let's just say that 2 million more was transferred from the sewer fund to the general fund than should have been, that was budgeted, right? Then at the end of 2016, there should have been a $2 million, there should have been a big surplus in the general fund, but there wasn't. This is something you really need to get to the bottom. I mean, I understand the superficial explanation that this was a result of money going back and forth between the sewer fund and the general fund. But if the general fund required $2 million more than was budgeted, why?
Well,
what expense was $2 million more, or what revenue item was $2 million less?
I know you want to understand this, but
I think you should.
I understand it as well as I got all the hairs on top of my head.
Okay.
But what the previous administration did was they overspent all the various line items of the various funds, and the borough was coming up short, very short. So being an enterprise fund, parking is enterprise and wastewater is enterprise funds. You're allowed to deduct money from those funds to use them to benefit the borough. And the previous administration, what they did was they balanced the budget and paid the other bills that had to be paid that given year for that they were short. You can't overspend line items and expect other funds to be able to carry them or get rid of the debt.
But what you're saying is that in 2016, the general fund overspent its budget by $2 million, and the only way that it was able to get through that year was by transferring money from the sewer fund to make up that overspending.
As I understand it, yes. And
Okay.
if I'm wrong, Ms. Leonti will be able to clarify it.
I'm not trying to figure out who's right or wrong. I'm trying to understand what really happened, because then the problem really was in 2016, there was a massive amount of overspending. $2 million.
Is that when this was redone?
No. Mayor, we were sitting over there at the particular time. The Borough Council was at a different location, and that's before we went to the Spellman Building. And the unfortunate thing was that the administration and finance, one wasn't prepared to be a quality person running the finance department because that was not his particular expertise. And the borough manager at that particular time decided to take advantage, I think, of the inexperience of the person running the finance department. And that's how everything's got washed through. So it's, we've come to a crossroads now where it's a point where we're allowed to to get our books clean and then move forward.
Well, I understand that, but I mean, there was a lot of years have gone by. So why in the next couple of years was this not resolved? Like in 17 or 18 or 19? I don't even know if you were here then, Barb, but why was this not resolved then in those following years? All prior to COVID. And now COVID hits and, you know, it's a storm.
So the best way that I can answer that is, you know, over those years, kind of the general fund has never really gotten to a point where it's had excess cash to be able to pay these liabilities off. And it's been one of those things that we've known they're on the books, and it's something that we knew we had to take care of, but it got to a point where we just kind of let it sit there until we thought that we would have enough money to do that, and we never did. You know, it moved on from year to year to year. And then COVID hit, and then, you know, we had a lot of changes when we had to revise the budget. And it's just, you know, it's been a struggle trying to keep the cash balances where we need to keep them to have anything in excess to meet these needs. The one thing I will say, and one thing I always harp on, and I know people probably find it to be very annoying, but to your point, Mr. Lorgus, when you make a budget and you have revenues in there that may or may not be good numbers, if you have expenses that are based on those revenues and they're not coming in, you don't have the money to be able to pay some of those expenses. So,
Well, and that was actually the point I was trying to make, is if in fact there was a $2 million shortfall in 2016, then that would explain what happened. But that means that the 2016 budget was really pumped up, was inflated, was never realistic. All right, I'm not so much opposed to you doing this write down, because I understand, and Bernie, you read something that made sense there. It's never going to be paid back. We know that. But what I am asking you to do is not to close the books on what happened in 2016. I think you do need to find out. I mean, if it's simply, no, Barbara, we don't have to settle it tonight. But I don't want you to do this and walk away. I think we still need to find out what happened in 2016. Okay? Thank
I
you.
think your point's taken, and I think you're right. But I don't think this action tonight should make that go away. But we're gonna have to keep looking at it. You're great. Yeah, I agree.
I'll just quickly say for the record that I do share your curiosity. So thank you. Just saying I do share your curiosity as well. So I appreciate you bringing it up.
Now, Mr. Stefano and Mr. Allen, in 2018, all right, Barb, if I'm wrong, correct me. In 2018, when Diane Herron was mayor, because I can remember her asking for police cameras because the police needed a bunch of cameras down on downtown. We did have a surplus that year. Surprisingly, we had more than $2 million surplus. Okay? That year, we transferred $2 million into the capital reserve fund because at the end of the year, we had 2 million and change. And I didn't want us to go spend the $2 million. I convinced council that we should take that $2 million and roll it into the capital reserve fund. And we did provide the cameras for the police downtown and some other isolated things. Barb, am I correct on that scenario? So the $2 million never really disappeared. Somehow it washed itself out. And the following year, in 2018, we had a surplus and we transferred the excess money into the capital reserve fund because we only had $6 million in there. And our bond people said we should actually have 15 million. And I don't know if we're ever going to get those 15 million. So, Mr. Metric, is that how you understand the whisper down the lane as well?
No, it's the first time I'm hearing, but I know where to look to get those answers. Yeah.
Yeah, Barb, do you remember the date we transferred the 2 million? We were in the Spellman building at the particular time.
I can certainly figure that out.
So the 2 million never went bye-bye. It went into the capital reserve once it kind of flushed to the top. And because it's in capital reserve right now. So that's the bottom line.
That's a possible solution then,
It-
so-
it-
or reasoning why.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
Okay. All right. I don't think we're going to get that answer vetted tonight, but I do know that what's presented for us is to help clean up our books a bit, regardless of that. So, is anybody opposed to this? All right. So we're going to put item 17 on our consent. We're going to move on to item 18, which is approve a grant resolution for the Westchester Racquet Club Center rehabilitation at Hoops Park. Is this to sign a grant, like an application for a grant? I'm not sure.
This is, sorry, Keith Krauske, Director of Parks and Recreation. This is to apply for the grant. Sorry, hopefully we get the monies and instead of, spending taxpayer dollars, we're spending half money from the state.
Is it like a match grant at all? Or
Yeah,
is it just,
if I'm not mistaken, it's going to be a 50-50 match grant. We're anticipating the project to cost somewhere in the neighborhood of 125 to maybe 150K.
okay.
And State Representative Chris Pielli did approve, wrote a letter of recommendation for the grant.
Nice, thank you.
Great. Any questions about this? That'd be nice to get. Okay. Any other comments from out there? Public? No? Okay. So that'll go under consent as well, 18. Item 19, we just have one item A. 19A is to approve our February 14th and 15th, 2023 Borough Council meeting minutes. Anybody have any issues with those minutes? Okay, those will go under consent. Any other business?
Mr. Stefano, one question from a esteemed resident from the 4th Ward. She doesn't belong to the sweetest ward in the borough, but she belongs to the 4th Ward. And this goes to Mr. Gore. The resident wanted to know approximately how many apartments do we inspect during a given year? And when we do the inspection, are we paying attention to the front sidewalks?
So we currently have about little over 5,800 rental units in the borough. And yes, the code enforcement officers are directed to check the front sidewalks when they're doing those inspections. We also have them looking at sidewalks during their proactive enforcement time when they're driving around town.
I'm sure the resident on South Penn Street will be very happy. Thank you.
Any other business? All right, seeing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.